HogvilleNET YouTube Live. I'm Kevin McPherson. Looking back at a very, very busy 4 consecutive days, I guess, for the Arkansas Razorbacks men's basketball program. John Calipari. We know the team swept through Central Arkansas. First Hot Springs on Saturday, then Pine Bluff on Sunday for the tip-off tour event for fans. The last time we were on was on Saturday. I came to you live from Banco's EK Arena in Hot Springs after the first of the first leg of the two tip-off tour events. But I got to go to both, and so we're going to follow up on some stuff because I'm going to double down on some stuff I got to see twice. And not that I've formed absolute conclusions going into the season about certain players, but there are things I want to add on to or reinforce that we've already talked about on Saturday. Of course, recruiting continues to evolve. Things continue to happen for the program even beyond the weekend. On Monday, Arkansas men's basketball had what it called its media day, and really what it was is getting players in uniforms, doing different photo shoots, videos. They didn't actually invite the press in, but they had their own internal media day, getting a lot of stuff ready for content to use later on. And then Tuesday, you had Calipari and two veterans. One that came with him from Kentucky to Arkansas, Adu Thiero, be a third-year player under Calipari, and then a traditional transfer in Nellie Davis, with Calipari on the road in Birmingham for SEC Media Days. Arkansas had its opportunities yesterday. And so when you hear Calipari, he sat down for an interview with SEC Network, and then he was at the podium for about 20 minutes. And a lot of this stuff is stuff he's already covered. There's not a lot of nuance or newness to it, but two or three things that I picked out of that, I thought was a little bit interesting beyond what we've already heard. I've probably been in some various media scrums, formal press conferences. When you add it all up, I've probably been in front of Calipari more than most and asked him a lot of questions. So a lot of it's stuff, and especially the last few weeks. Remember, he was in Hot Springs for a coach's clinic weeks ago. Then he was at Little Rock Catholic last week or the week before last, and we asked questions there. And then again, he didn't do press after the Hot Springs event. He was off to Pittsburgh to go to a coaching clinic. But then on Sunday, he did sit down with the press after the Pine Bluff thing. So I've gotten a lot from him. A lot of it's territory he covered at SEC Media Days. We got player interviews down in Hot Springs. When you look at Trevor Brazile and Carter Knox, the freshman. And then again, you had Nellie Davis and Adu Thiero answering media questions and engaging and interacting at SEC Media Days. So if you look at the last 4 days, on-court stuff that fans and media saw, and of course, they did charity work for the communities. Calipari's really big on that. He's talked a lot about it. He gets his team and players involved in that. That's great. Samaritan's Feet, he talked about it at SEC Media Days. A lot of photo ops and autographs and meet and greet stuff. But the sheer basketball stuff in the last 4 days, we've gotten on the record, Calipari, Kenny Payne, associate head coach. We've got now 4 different players in press conference situations between the Hot Springs event on Saturday and SEC Media Days. So really these last 4 days, when you add it all up, it's probably the busiest in terms of what fans have been able to see and what media have been able to see, which makes sense. Here we are, we're in mid-October. We are ramping up for the start of the season. The next thing on the books for all of us is that Kansas game. Unless Calipari holds another press conference, maybe he'll do a pre-game lead-up presser like you would see in the regular season. Maybe he does one of those the week of the Kansas game. But that's the next big thing. It's exhibition season. The AP Top 25 poll just came out. The first one of the season was just released. We're going to talk a little bit more about that, but I think it adds a little bit extra intrigue maybe to the matchup that Arkansas is going to have against the Jayhawks in Bud Walton Arena. Again, it's an exhibition game. We saw what happened in that place last year against a Purdue team ranked in the top 3, projected to be a real contender for a national championship. We saw that Purdue team almost lived up to those expectations, and an Arkansas team that came in with similar preseason rankings to this team and completely tanked. So each season has its own, its own context and meaning, and You got a whole new coaching staff. You've got basically a whole new team. Trevor Brazile, the lone returnee, and then Kansas, in some ways, is reloaded and then bringing guys back. And you understand why the Jayhawks are the number one team in the country. I've said Alabama might be I think Alabama came in second in the AP poll. Some other outlets have Alabama number one. But again, a lot going on. Not only on Monday did Arkansas have its media day in terms of internal stuff, but you had a lot of national and SEC projections coming out. So there's still, again, a lot to talk about because of how busy things have been ramping up for this season. There's a lot of good stuff. We're going to talk recruiting today. The last few segments, I think I've opened up with recruiting, or maybe the last one I didn't. But I'm going to, again, start with the business of basketball and then get into recruiting, the second part of it. Because let's go back through. First of all, SEC. I'm going to go to SEC media days. A couple of things that stood out to me in Calipari's presser are really things he touched on Sunday, meeting with the media after the second tip-off tour event in Pine Bluff. Because I asked him directly. I said, "You held guys out. We didn't see Nelly Davis at all go through anything. We saw Jonas Adu and Adu Thiero, two of your four frontline pieces. Thiero's going to play on the three and the wing as well. But you saw both of those guys very, very limited in a little bit of just a fraction of drill work, nothing that was even that could be argued competitive when the GAs and one player, Jaden Carolette, were trying to defend Arkansas's offensive, 5-on-5 offensive drills. So a lot of question marks there. So I asked Calipari after in that presser on Sunday, are these guys you've mentioned, they're only going to be out a few days. Do you see everybody back and ready to go for the Kansas game? And he goes, look, he didn't sink his teeth into his answer and take the full, question head on, but he did say, not if they're not ready. We're not going to push any back too soon. He mentioned that at SEC Media Day. So you've had 2 more days effectively since the last time we talked to him to hear him talk about that. And so, he's still obviously keeping his cards close to the vest. They'll figure that out. And then it's interesting if they do get players back, these players we're talking about, if they do get them back, are they released to return for full competitive play? Is it a gradual thing? Because October 25th is now just 9 days away, that exhibition game against Kansas. And so that's a pretty quick turnaround. We'll see if it's all hands on deck. Nelly Davis was seen wearing some kind of a brace on his hand. Jonas Adu's been dealing with the foot. I guess it was a right foot based on the boot was on his right foot. If it's the same injury or situation, whatever the extent of it was that we saw in the photos with Nolan a month or so ago, maybe it's still something to do with that. Adu Thiero, again, Calipari keeps phrasing this. He's got some guys that are beat up or banged up. So we don't know the severity of it, but if he's talking about guys coming back within a handful of days, and he was saying that on, over the last few days, it means they could return any day now. Maybe when they get back from SEC Media Days, everybody's cleared and ready to come back, something like that. We don't know. That's speculation. And it also is not as much excitement's going to be around that Kansas game. The place will be packed. I see Kentucky social media jumping all over the fact that the 2 tip-off tour events, they weren't packed houses in small venues. It was something that I noticed. Calipari touched on that Sunday. He said, look, we did not plan. Everything's been late with what we've done with everything, putting a schedule together. We've just been a little bit behind, but he didn't really promote it very well. It was one of those things where he feels like it'll continue to get better. He seemed genuinely not concerned by it. Now, he's really good in front of a microphone, and so maybe he does a good job of hiding disappointment. But Big Blue Nation jumped over that. What does it matter? The house is going to be packed at Bud for Kansas, an exhibition game, just like it was for Purdue last year. And Arkansas basketball's got nothing to make apologies for. But I did want to explain it because to me, I honestly thought walking into it would be something like that. More, where you wouldn't see as many empty seats in those. So just addressing it here, we're going to move on though. I think the other thing that came out during when Calipari was talking about his team yesterday, one thing when he mentioned Carter Knox at the end, it was kind of the end of his part. Biggest takeaway from SEC Media Day. Again, I kind of said it leading into all of this. We're 10 minutes in. Thank you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. By the way, here comes one of my pleas. I only sometimes do one, maybe two or three. It depends on how long I go. To please hit subscribe and like, and then share the content if you like it. We love bringing it. I like it so much I didn't bother shaving today. I thought I'm going to go. Let's start the winter beard growth. I never follow through with it. I never finish. I used to have a full beard a long time ago and a goatee. And in my younger days, I've tried different looks, but I could have used a shave this morning. But so thank you folks for bearing with me. But I thought the biggest takeaways were just the fact, if I was really, because of all the stuff that we've already gotten from Calipari, it wasn't a lot different from that. I'd say just when he was asked about Kentucky in the very beginning, and he said, "Look, we're not going to talk about the past. I'm on the record about my reasons for leaving or how this all transpired. You can go back and get that. Let's talk about the SEC. Let's talk about my team now. Let's move forward." When he was asked about Mark Pope, he said glowing, rave reviews about Kentucky hiring the right guy for that job, and that he's still a Kentucky fan aside from they play Arkansas. That was all the right things to say, and it probably stood out more than anything here in Arkansas when we have him. We're not talking about all that stuff as much. We're talking about the business at hand. You understand why other media members getting access to him for the first time really since April when the change happened. You understand the questions. So those things stood out to me just because it's like, okay, this is how he's handling this. This is how he handled these questions at SEC Media Day. It makes sense. He was going to be, they were going to try to put him on the record again about some stuff, and he wanted to move on to the business at hand. So I thought that was good. I thought what he said about Pope was good. The fact that he's still talking about injuries and he's not sure what Arkansas is going to have to run out on the court. That could be a strategic thing. Coaches do that. Maybe he knows he's going to have all guys back. When I asked him, basically the same answer. We're not sure yet, but we're not going to rush anybody. So the Arkansas team you see, on Friday, October 25th, may or may not be at full strength. And even if it is at full strength, there's a lot more question marks, I think, with this Arkansas team, not only because of a new regime and basically a brand new roster, but I think because Kansas, entrenched with Bill Self and a program that, recently won a national title, continues to be the top team in the Big 12 effectively. When you look at it from the larger landscape, and a team that's projected number one now by the Associated Press, coming into the season, and you understand it with Hunter Dickinson, KJ Adams, some of the other pieces they're bringing back, some of the guys they brought in. And it was kind of that way last year when Arkansas beat Purdue. Purdue had a lot of guys back. Zach Edey, most of the starters, I think, if not all of them, maybe four of them. It seems like Braden Smith, Lawyer, whoever the other guard was. They had a lot of guys back, and Arkansas had basically reassembled a roster, but they did have Devo Davis back. They did have Trevor Brazile back. And so, but they basically, everything else was basically new. And as bad as that Arkansas team was through the regular season, it did win a game against a really good Purdue team. And so you just never know what the dynamics are. Calipari continues to talk about it. He did it at SEC Media Days. Don't judge us based on who we are early. We'll get better. And it takes sometimes 2 years when he builds a program to get it where he wants to be, because it could happen sooner. It could take longer. All of these things are things he talked about. I think, again, with Carter Knox, when he was asked about him, he mentioned not only had he lost the weight, it was really good, 17 pounds. I saw Carter Knox. He looked really good. We're going to go through some of the talking points. I'm going to go through my top 5 things here in a little bit that stood out from the 2 days of the tip-off tour on court. It was all on court stuff that stood out that I want to talk about, because the other stuff surrounding it is fun stuff. We've talked about it already. We'll go through the top 5 takeaways from on court. But again, I thought it was interesting when you talk about Carter Knox saying, look, he's a guy that can play multiple positions. And I've thought about Arkansas being thin on the front line and small ball lineups. Could he shift and give you a few minutes as a small ball 4? Maybe he can play the wing, maybe some 2. And then Calipari said, look, if he gets a defensive rebound, it said this at Media Days. I haven't heard this yet until yesterday. Said, he can bring the ball up the floor and initiate our offense. He's our lead guard. So you see that in basketball. That's not a big deal, other than he's saying he's got more trust. The one thing about Carter Knox, And was going to include this in my top five, but since I have it in here, because I'm going to go through the guards in that list. But just one thing about the 2 days, he was the first player on the court for warmups, and he wasn't by himself. He was out there with Brad Calipari and some other staffers, at least 2 or 3 other staffers, going through little individual shooting stuff where you start right in front of the basket and work out. And they just worked on different things from him from a wing standpoint, running off the wing to a spot, getting to a spot, feeling a little hand or pressure on his back or lower back, and then playing off of that, catching a pass and getting into a mid-range shot. And so all of that, it was just repetitious. And so when the rest of the team would file onto the floor, they were on one end of the court going through just typical shooting warm-up drills, just, when there's no coaches out there and it's nothing specific, they're just getting up shots, kind of warming up. With Carter Knox, his stuff was very specific, and so I thought all of that showed me that they're trying to work on his individual stuff because of the talent levels there. If you look at OT, when I watched his footage and a lot of stuff, put up really good numbers, a volume score guy at that level. But a lot of that, you could see some wasted ball movement, some wasted movement, some extra dribbles where he wasn't sure, not always identifying a spot. So I think they're trying to tighten up the footwork, how many steps he takes, show him less is more. And the way that you drill that in and get that muscle memory and make it more instinctive is to just train on it and drill down on it and work through it. And it's repetition on this stuff. And so you saw Brad Calipari with some really good stuff. Lean on him a little bit. He moves off of that, takes one dribble, pulls up, and takes a shot and gets to a specific spot with fewer steps, fewer dribbles, and they're trying to, and so they move that stuff around a little bit to find different maybe spots on the floor where they can get him in a comfort zone and just get things simplified for him. So I spent a lot of time on that, only to say, if this is, to me, what we saw was probably typical practice stuff and how they do things with individual players, how they do things in their drill work. They didn't show us much defense. So we're going to get into my top five stuff here in just a little bit. I'm starting to drift into it, and I wanted to stick on the last couple of days with SEC Media Days first. So we, again, Calipari, they did about an 8-minute interview, he and Adu Thiero and Nellie Davis with SEC Network. I thought it was pretty poorly done. They usher in Paul Feinbaum to do his show. I guess at a certain time, and it was the time when Arkansas was coming on to have its part of the car wash there with SEC Network, and the questions were weak. Nellie Davis's microphone wasn't working. His headset mic said to bring him out a microphone. I can get over some of that stuff, but again, this isn't brain surgery. You're not going to learn anything at SEC Media Days that's vastly different than anything we've already heard. Because we've had, since late July, we've had Calipari and at least 2 formal press conferences at Bud Walton Arena and some of these other opportunities where I've been able to get around the state and get him on the record. And so, like I said, not a whole lot of nuance and newness there. Now, let's go back to Monday. The AP poll came out. I thought, looking at it, Arkansas comes in at number 16. It's very similar to the preseason rankings Arkansas had in the last few years, with the great job Eric Patrick Melsman did with the program in getting Arkansas respect nationally. Arkansas, after years and years of drought of not being recognized in rankings coming into seasons for the most part, very few rare exceptions, EPM had them consistently starting to do that. And you saw it again. You see it again this year with Calipari in this roster. 16th, it's the 5th highest rated SEC team. But there's a bunched up group when you look at outside of Bama at number 2, which I already mentioned, Tennessee at 11, Auburn at 11, Tennessee at 12, Texas A&M at 13. None of this surprises me. Arkansas at 16. Then you had Texas at 19, newcomer to the SEC. 21 was Florida. Kentucky was 23rd. And I believe Ole Miss was 24. So nine SEC teams. This isn't football. Don't adjust your whatever device you're watching me on. Don't make any adjustments. You heard it right. 9 SEC basketball teams in the first AP Top 25 college basketball poll. If you said that 5 years ago, Calipari used the word Fugazi a couple of times. There's some news. There's something nuanced about what he said. He used that Fugazi, but if you just said 5 years ago 9 SEC basketball teams were ranked in an AP Top 25 poll, you would have said that was Fugazi. Fairy dust doesn't exist. Not even low. You can't even find it on the elemental chart. That's what it is. So we talked about it. I did my SEC power rankings. I've talked a lot about the fact that Lunardi consistently has 10 SEC teams in his way early bracketology projections. And if you in mine top 9 SEC in the power rankings, those are the 9 teams that are in the preseason rankings. So they're not in the same exact order as the rankings have them, but those same 9 schools are the ones I have. My 10th school in my SEC power rankings. If you guys saw that a few weeks ago when I put it out, you can check it out on HogvilleNET YouTube, on our YouTube archive, or you can go to HogvilleNET. But Mississippi State's the other one. Calipari said, look, we may end up with 10 or 11 teams make the NCAA tournament. So he understands the strength of the league, but this AP Top 25 going through that, some fans are like, well, they've got Arkansas ranked too low. Maybe I've said when I saw the final, when Trevor Brazile was added as the 9th and final piece to the top 2 rotation, yeah, they added more players later, but the rotation guys were set after Brazile. I said, look, this to me looks like a team that should be projected top 3 or 4 SEC. In my power rankings, I have them 3rd. And that would put them in a 10 to 15 range in the rankings. Well, 16. Andy Katz on Monday with NCAA March Madness, a longtime college basketball analyst, used to be with ESPN for years. He has Arkansas 13th in his first Power 37. He's doing a Power 37 rankings around Division I basketball. Arkansas comes in at 13th there. John Rothstein, and this has been a few weeks ago, but the last time I saw him rank teams, he had Arkansas 9th and finishing 2nd in the SEC. The initial KenPom analytical ratings came out, and Arkansas's 25th in that. So it's a pretty good range from a top 10 projection from Rothstein, 13th by Andy Katz, 16th by the Associated Press, and then KenPom's got him at 25th. And if you look at the 4 seed that Lunardi has Arkansas projected in his most recent, it's been a couple of weeks or so, in his most recent bracketology, a 4 seed really puts you in that 13 to 16 range. If you were going to equivalate that, find an equivalency to a ranking, it doesn't always work that way, but that would be a 13 to 16 range there. So it's in the wheelhouse of what I thought it would be right after Arkansas added Trevor Brazile way back when. Now this stuff, as we get close to the season, is kind of shaking out, kind of how I envisioned it and talked about it, been on the record multiple times talking about it. Not that matters. We know what's going to matter is what really plays out. Remember, again, this Arkansas team last year came in with lofty expectations, and we saw what happened to that. Even the year before, when Arkansas went to a Sweet 16, that team ended up, it had a top 15-ish preseason ranking and struggled. It ended up 8 and 10 in the SEC and had injury problems, that's for sure. But then ended up, speaking of Kansas, knocking off that Kansas team and advancing to the Sweet 16 that season. But having said all that, what's being talked about now, all this stuff is great. It's fun. It's exciting as we're ramping up and getting ready for the season. 23 minutes in, by the way. But what does it all really mean? All right, let's, because all that stuff's gonna prove itself one way or the other. And I think the combination of veterans, I think the talent that he brought with him from Kentucky from the high school signees, I think the continuity with some of the players, all of these are things we've talked about, but I'll just repeat it. If they can get healthy, I've always said the biggest issues are health, especially on a thin front line. I think you can maybe deal with a little bit of temporary attrition in the backcourt, although you don't want that to be Nelly Davis, the guy that's projected. This was the other thing from Monday. Arkansas was projected as by the SEC media to finish 4th in the SEC. I didn't mention that when I went through all the stuff we just talked about. I have them 3rd in my power rankings. The SEC projected Arkansas 4th. Bama and Auburn 1-2, just like I have it in my SEC power rankings. I believe they had Tennessee was 3rd. I think that's right. I have that published somewhere, and it's jumbled up in my head right now. But Arkansas was 4th in those. The SEC projected 2 Arkansas players as second team. This is preseason, second team All SEC, and it's as expected. Jonas Adu, a returning transfer from Tennessee, but a returning All SEC performer both defensively and was a second team postseason pick last year, or picked after at the end of the regular season. And then both of those guys, Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu, projected as second team All SEC. I really thought maybe Nelly Davis would sneak in and be a first team preseason pick. The media only did 5 for each. And so at the end of the season, when the SEC does its picks, it'll have like 8 first team members, 8 second team members, and all defensive team and all freshman team. The preseason player of the year, no surprise here, Mark Sears of Alabama, the very really good guard that's really hurt Arkansas in so many matchups the last couple of years. The top returnee probably in the league when you look at that Final Four experience just from that standpoint. Nelly Davis was also picked by CBS Sports on Monday as a preseason third-team All-American pick. So that's good recognition for Nelly Davis. All right, so I want to get into now, 26 minutes in, I want to get into my top 5 takeaways from the 2-day tip-off tour. We talked about things that stood out to me on Saturday at the end of the first one in Hot Springs, but having seen it for 2 days, I think the number one thing is just going back to the injuries. We didn't see any Nelly Davis other than street clothes walking around. He'd pick a basketball up off the basketball rack, take a couple of dribbles, just walking and talking, and then I didn't even see him put up a shot, just walking around, when there was nothing going on. I didn't see him even put the ball up towards the rim. Now I've seen Nelly Davis as a lead up to coming to Arkansas on big stages, even playing at Florida Atlantic, because he helped that team get to a Final Four and get back to the NCAA tournament. They played some high major schools in the regular season, so he's been really, really good. I don't have any doubts about him as a player. I have doubts about what does it mean injury-wise right now in terms of his availability, his effectiveness once he's available. And it's a good thing Arkansas has some, even though they're major tune-ups in the exhibition. Don't forget TCU a week after Kansas. Is he going to even play? Will he be available? So injuries coming out of that, because we didn't see Adu Theo and Jonas Adu, except for a little bit of, I'll call it light drill work. It's just, those are all 3 players that you figure into your starting lineup, all things being healthy. So that's 60% of your starters that we didn't see do anything meaningful over those 2 days. It's not that that's important that we have seen that, but to talk about what I saw from this team, that's a huge part of the calculus. I liked what I saw individually and how guys worked together from the 6 that were available. But it doesn't give us a full body of answers of what to expect. Not even close. Even if we'd have seen all of them, they're only going to show us so much. We didn't see any defensive drills. But the fewer pieces that you see, the more questions that you have. So I think my biggest takeaway is injuries limited how much I got out of that. The lack of availability, the attrition, subtracted what I wanted to talk, maybe what I would have been able to share with you. So one of my top 5 takeaways is, what is this team really with all hands on deck? And then how quickly can they get guys back and into their true rhythm and playing shape? How much have they missed? I think Calipari said Thiero has been out a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. That's not a lot, not considering, not necessarily, not considering they had a full June and July. Yeah, it was limited practice. But if he was full go for that and full go for most of what they've done since returning in late August, and it's just been, so maybe that's not such a big deal with him. I don't know. I'm assuming maybe Jonas Adu's missed more time because he was actually seen in a boot for a while. And then with Nelly Davis, I don't know how recent that is. And so again, these are, of my top 5 takeaways, that's number 1, only because I just explained the significance of it. And now you're on a short track to getting into your season. It's right here. I mean, it's, you've got a few more days to get all hands on deck. I think the second biggest takeaway is just how consistently good Trevor Brazile looked in more ways than one. He's bigger physically. You see that he's stronger. One of my biggest concerns in the offseason was front court depth and physicality. But when guys like Brazile are starting to flip a switch in terms of adding meaningful strength and weight, you could see it. But his approach to the game seems more mature to me than it ever has. More mature, because I'm watching every single play and he seems locked in. He's playing, he doesn't seem sped up. He doesn't seem unsure. All things I noticed with him at Arkansas. And he'd have some great games. He'd have plenty in 2 years, 35 games spread out over 2 years dealing with injuries, where you understood the vast potential of this guy. And it wasn't like he had a flash here and there. He had several solid games and some really big wow moments. But now, and again, it's practice. It's not 5-on-5 against really good players that are your teammates. You're only 9 deep anyway. But at the same time, it's just the little things in terms of how he attacked, and that was the other part of it. Not only was he sure of himself, and not only did he not hesitate, and he didn't rush things and get in a hurry, but he attacked. He understood how to use ball fakes because he can shoot, and then drive, finishing at the rim every opportunity he got, not shying away from any potential. Now, they're going to not go hard after these guys and using GAs, but they did have size. I mean, Arkansas's got at least 2 GAs that are 6'10" or taller. And so Brazile, again, it's a practice setting. Arkansas did some things offensively that I think really favor what his game could be, which what an NBA scout told me back when he was at the combine. He said, Calipari staying in Arkansas, coming back to school, getting out of the portal and staying with Calipari is the best thing he can do. I just recently talked to that same NBA scout a couple of days ago to tell him what I was seeing from the practices. And I said, so many guys that once they're in their 4th year and for whatever reason they can't they don't have the right draft stock, you rarely see guys actually improve their stock. Usually it's the other way around, and now they can maximize NIL money maybe, and go as long as they can with that, and then see what happens with their pro career later. And he said he's one of those guys that if he puts it all together and has a good season consistently, he said he not only could be a first-round pick, he goes, but he might threaten a lottery selection. That's what he said about Brazile. So this is one of the same scouts that saw him a year ago at Pro Day at Arkansas and was blown away. And he said, I've seen enough of him that if he can put it all together, he'll be a guy, and there aren't many, that can actually really, really help themselves. The older you get, typically, doesn't matter what kind of stats you put up, you're a known commodity, and you're not really going to be able to help yourself too much because of his athletic traits, because of his skill set. And then you're looking now to see, can he deal with physicality? Can he broaden his game and his maturity level and then be consistent? So I think those are the things. So number 2 on my list is Trevor Brazile, only because we didn't see 3 guys that are going to be 60% probably for your starting lineup, almost certainly. And so what was left over, Brazile, to me, was the best out there for what that's worth. And it wasn't just a few plays here and there where he gets it, and then a few plays where like scratching your head again. That was so much what you saw in those first 2 years at Arkansas. That he really executed, I thought, really, really well with everything he did. Sometimes it's just making the right read, making the next pass, getting to the right spot, making a challenge. You may not win the play, but challenge. I mean, all of those things he consistently did well. All right, Trevor Brazile. I mean, 6'2", 7'4" wingspan, can jump out of the gym, had some windmill dunks, he just, had some nice finishes around the basket with touch where his timing was really good. He didn't speed up. He didn't overthink it. He just got into the play and used his athleticism and talent to finish. Those are the things you need to see consistently. You need to see him chest up and body up with guys and take on those challenges and not back away. We did not see defensive drills with the players in Hot Springs or Pine Bluff. And so that's also been a big challenge for him. Not having seen that, I can't speak to that part of it, which will be huge. So there's that caveat. I probably should have disclaimed that first before talking about what I did like. Third on my list, I'm going to get to players again, but I want to talk offense and defense because I just set it up. We only saw offensive drills. We didn't see defense. Calipari continues to talk about, he has in the last 3 or 4 settings, he likes the physicality in Arkansas's on this team, especially again on a front line that's thin in terms of numbers. Only 3 or 4 guys. If you kind of do Thiero, it's 4. And so the more I hear him talk about it, the more I wonder, is he speaking to this relative to his Kentucky team last year? His Kentucky team last year ranked outside the top 100 in defense. It's had progressively gotten worse. Ranked in the high 60s the year before that. 2 seasons prior to that was in the 30s. That's okay, but once you start drifting outside the top 50 in your defensive metrics, and we're talking KenPom now, ranked 109th in defensive efficiency, and you think back to some of the frontline guys, younger guys, thin, not necessarily bulked up. Once you got beyond the Oscar Sheboy days, and this Arkansas team has now veteran big guys. When you look at Jonas Adu, who's big, he's solidly built. You've added a veteran guy in Trevor Brazile who's added some weight. He's still not a beef monster, but he's bigger. And then you could tell Big Z. Big Z's put on weight and strength. He's bigger than he was a year ago. Jonas Adu's already a man-child at 6'7", 6'8". Seeing him in person, I think he's tweening 6'7", maybe in shoes, and on a good day he's 6'8". But he's also a big, strong guy and very athletic. And so Calipari feels good about the physicality of his front line and some of his guards as well. But I think what he's saying here is that he thinks that it's going to help him be better defensively. But if he's relating it only to how bad Kentucky was last year, that's a big leap you're going to have to make to be good enough defensively to not only to be one of the top teams in this SEC, which we just said is loaded, but to be one of the top teams in the country. He got away with it last year because of how good the offense was. It was elite. He said for back-to-back years now, they've had top 10 rated offenses. I need to go back and look at the previous year on KenPom. I know last year they were 7th or 6th, led the NCAA. I've talked about this, and he mentioned it at SEC Media Days. He said they led the nation in three-point efficiency, which is true. And I've talked about it on these segments, but I also said in volume-wise, they were second only to Alabama in the SEC last year. They took a lot of threes too. But that roster and that group was designed for that. This roster is going to play, now that since we didn't see defensive drills, let's talk offense. Calipari said over and over again, this team is going to attack. He wants to put pressure on the paint, put pressure on the rim. I talked about it Saturday. This is going to be an inside-out team. It's going to be a team that attacks from the wings, going to try to use ball movement off that dribble drive motion offense and pass out because they want paint touches. They want to get in and attack and pressure the rim and get an easier shot if they can first, even if it's a mid-range or a runner or something like that. But they're going to kick it out. They're going to take threes. It's not to say that they won't, but it's not an offense that's predicated on total floor spacing and ball movement out on the perimeter, looking for threes first and then play off of that to get inside and get closer to the basket. It's going to work the other way. They're really going to try to use their athleticism, their slashing ability, and some of those skills and talents and some of the guys he's brought in, and then get to that paint. They want paint touches and feed off of that. And then they can kick it out. They've got good passers in there. But so the offense, to me, talking about that as a concept, these drills, most of the drills, again, were full court drills. They want to play at a fast pace. He talks about sharing the ball. Those are the two things I've said for a while. Primary and secondary transition would be the key for this team. And then they'll run that dribble drive motion offense off of that. And they'll have some sets and different things they do. One of the things we saw, and this is going to be my playing off this idea of offense and how they want to do it. What I really liked about the drills is, they'd have the GAs and Caroletwa at one end, and they'd take a shot. If it went in, you're inbounding the ball and getting the ball up full court. Or if you rebound it defensively, you're getting it up court. You're getting the ball either to a lead guard or you're bringing it up, depending upon who it was yourself. But the idea was they keep doing the same drills because they want to get that pace right. They want to get that tempo to their liking and get guys getting to the spots in transition. And you saw some secondary transition opportunities, multiple primary and secondary transition opportunities. But in these particular drills, they went ahead and did not take advantage of those because they wanted to run pace offense in a true half-court setting and just work on their stuff because they had a lot of opportunities again. So I think what's interesting about that is all of the shell drills with no defenders is what we're going to see. Those are integrated to get them playing as fast as they can so that they can excel in primary and secondary transition. When they actually had some defense, it was 5-on-5 in these drills and in this practice, they didn't take those opportunities to go primary or secondary. They went ahead and ran their stuff to see how that worked. And one of the biggest things, one of my biggest takeaways here, and this is now transitioning from offense to my fourth thing here on the list, was Big Z out high. A lot of stuff when Big Z, they were alternating the bigs, Trevor Brazile and Big Z, because they had 6 available guys going 5-on-5. So they'd alternate those two. They'd also shuttle out, I think, Carter Knox and Billy Richmond at times when they were trying to rotate and keep 5 on the floor and one guy had to wait for a few plays. But when they had Big Z out there, set him up a lot out high for 2-man game in the screen game. And man, he is really good. You saw a lot of ball reversal. And what he's doing is his hips are on a swivel and his head's on a swivel. He's setting a pick facing one side of the court out high, and then he's moving off of that. When the ball reverses, he's turning, and he is a setup guy. When the ball comes back to him, it starts maybe as a dribble handoff. And then when the ball reverses or comes back to him, he's then turning quickly and facing the basket, and guys are backdoor cutting off either wing, and he's making almost precision passes. It reminds me of what the work Jalen Williams would do and how effective he was at getting Arkansas easy looks. Even to some degree, Mekhi Mitchell, we saw him as a good passer off 2-man game the last couple of years, but we know Mekhi was in and out of the starting lineup. Some games he didn't play much. We'll see what Z's role is behind Jonas Adu, but I think he's going to play a lot. Only 9 deep, and you're going to have games where there's foul trouble. You're going to, who knows about injuries? We know that. But I think Z's going to have he's going to be above the 12 minutes a game last year. That's for certain. I think at a minimum, you're going to see him 15, 16 minutes a game at minimum. But when he's in there, he is a weapon as a passer. So you saw a lot in these drills of Big Z initiating offense. And Calipari said it yesterday. It's one of the things that stood out. When he mentioned Big Z at the SEC Media Days, he says, we want to play through him. Well, we saw that. He did a really good job of passing to guys. There was one play where off of a dribble handoff, Big Z slipped down to the low post. And this was a very interesting. We talk about how good he is as a passer, making the next pass. Sometimes he got a hockey assist. He didn't get the direct assist, but he made the right pass on time so that the next guy, the defense was out of position. When they tried to recover on the next guy that he threw to, the initial guy he passed to, when they tried to rotate to him, now they're out of position, and that guy made the next pass that ended up being a layup on a weak side baseline cutter, usually Carter Knox or Billy Richmond in these practice scenarios. One of those plays was with Big Z to Brazile, who made the next really good pass, made the right read. I mentioned Brazile making the correct reads and playing like a guy playing chess for once, instead of speed checkers. That's the easiest way to simplify what Brazile was doing. But Big Z had a play where there was a dribble handoff that he slipped down instead of staying high into the low block on the right side, and he got an entry pass. And one thing was very interesting because Arkansas, they were playing, the offense was playing with pace, and there was a little bit of traffic around him, just a little bit. But what he did is what you see really good players do, and players that understand, is that he made an offset pass. And instead of trying to get into off that pass into the interior and get into his offense, because there was a little mud and traffic around him that was clearing through with someone on one of his offensive teammates running through and defenders kind of clogged up, he could have taken a shot right then. But what he did is he reset. He kicked it back out, reset, let that traffic clear, and he got another immediate entry pass. And then he went to work. And he went left. He finished into the paint from the right side of the block. He turned into the paint, turning left, and finished with a little lefty soft touch that hit, I think it rolled on the rim against the backboard and in. It was a nice touch on that play. But even that play, it demonstrates his understanding of the passing game. Because sometimes the passing game is not just about setting other guys up, it's actually improving your chances to score. So many players have to learn how to play off the ball and how to share the ball, get off the ball, to actually help themselves. And that's one of the things that gets back into that less is more discussion, and why you see, when you see some of these things stand out to you, I could see how a Big Z can be a real help offensively just because of his decision-making and ability to pass. Arkansas's got a lot of talent. All of these players need to understand, as good as they are potentially as scorers, there's guys around them that can help and finish plays, and they can make the team better. And it goes back to Calipari's initial talking point that he keeps drumming home. We're gonna play with pace. We want to play fast, and then the second part of that's we're going to share the ball. So I thought the offensive to so the fourth takeaway, moving away from just talking offense defense, was how Big Z looked in that offense and how he's going to help him when he's on the court. I'd like to talk more about guys like Nelly Davis, Adu Thiero, and Jonas Adu, but I just can't. So number 5 on my list could have been higher, but I wanted to spend time on the backcourt because it's more than just one thing really. But Boogie Fland, outside of Trevor Brazile, I'd say Boogie Fland. If Trevor Brazile was number 1 in terms of players and what I saw in consistency, Boogie Fland was 1A. This guy is he consistently knocked down 3-pointers, pull up off the dribble, catch and shoot. When he broke down the defense on dribble drives, he almost always made the right read. Now, he wasn't perfect. He didn't make the play right every time, but he's a primary handler. Most of the drives were him and DJ Wagner, we're going to talk about. But Boogie Fland almost made all the right reads. I say almost. I mean, there were a few that weren't, but that could be said of anybody. But again, primary handler, he did a great job of finding guys. He really did a good job of locating off his drives. Rim runs on the baseline from guys like Carter Knox and Billy Richmond. He set Trevor Brazile up with some nice stuff. And then his shooting is just smooth. I mean, he's just a smooth operator, very confident. I thought Boogie Fland was 1A. I thought DJ Wagner, to me, because of the way that the offense moved side to side, and they did a good job of ball reversal, some skip passes to get advantages, that creates driving lanes. And so to me, he probably passed up 3 or 4 that I can remember when there were defenders out there between the GAs and Caroletta. He probably passed up some open 3 opportunities for drives, and you're like, well, but the strength of his game is driving and then picking and choosing. He's got a nice runner and floater game. He hit those at a high percentage. He did knock down, at least 2 or 3 threes that I can remember in some of the competitive stuff, but he didn't take a lot. So he might have had a high, he might have shot 50% from 3 because he didn't take a lot when it was competitive. But what he did do was use his strength. He's got a nice crossover game. I didn't see what you might consider ill effects from an ankle injury. At least I don't think so, simply because of how hard he was driving, how much, he was really putting a lot of leaning and a lot of pressure on both feet, bearing down on defenders trying to stop him. And he did really good jobs of getting to spots and, again, getting his runners or float game or dishing the ball off or passing it out. I noticed he probably did the best job of, once he did drive in, of passing it back out and trying to create a perimeter shot. So I thought DJ Wagner did a really good job. He was impressive. Again, you want his percentages from 3 to increase. The injury had a lot to do with that. Calipari talked about it yesterday. Last year as a freshman at Kentucky, you obviously think if he can improve his 3-point shot, then you can trust him more with some volume. But from what I saw in practice, and again, you've got other pieces of the puzzle that aren't out there. You don't know what they were telling some of these guys to focus on individually during this. But what I do know is it was his drive and setup game and pick and choose game. And he had a really good assist to turnover ratio as a true freshman at the high major level playing in the SEC last year at Kentucky. And so he makes good decisions with the ball. You like to see that. Carter Knox, I thought he's strong. He's in shape. Some of the, I talked about all the individual work he did in the actual competitive stuff. You saw him hit threes off ball movement, corner threes. He seemed comfortable in that corner. So he's running a lot off the corner on rim runs on the weak side when the ball's opposite side. But when there were skip passes or penetration and then kick out to the other side, a lot of times that found him open. And so he did a good job knocking down some threes, as did Billy Richmond. Both of them. Billy Richmond on his rim runs going baseline. Carter Knox is squeezing in there and getting some nice layups off good ball movement. Billy Richmond, he also got some layups, but he also got some dunks off of some of that. That guy is fearless. And Carter Knox going to get his share of dunks. But I think Billy Richmond is a special rim climber. I mean, you looked at last year, Arkansas had Trevor Brazile, and again, injury issues. There was a stretch there where he didn't play or was very limited when he did play. We've seen it on and off the last couple of years, but he was, just wildly athletic in those big rim finishes. And we know Ricky Council did that 2 years ago. But and that was the year that Brazile was only available for 8 games. So Arkansas now, between Brazile, a healthy Brazile, a Billy Richmond, and then a Duthiero, when Arkansas gets him back, you got 3 guys that are ESPN top 10 highlight reel worthy on any given night, and maybe multiple guys on the same night. I mean, that's what Arkansas is going to have from an athleticism and playing above the rim. All right, 50 minutes in, I've done it again. I haven't even gotten to recruiting. We spent a lot of time, but Boogie Flan to me probably stood out the most of the backcourt guys. Once you got beyond what Trevor Brazile showed me, and again, we didn't have Nelly Davis. We didn't have Nelly Davis in the backcourt. Remember, Duthiero is a 3-4. He'll help some at the 4. We'll see how much Arkansas needs him in the front court. Some people consider a small forward a front court player. It depends on, but the way with Arkansas's pace and the fact that they want him to improve his 3-point shot and put the ball on the deck some. We've talked about the shallow and short rolls off a 2-man game out high to get him downhill and get the ball to him quickly so that he can, get a fast track to the rim. Again, things we didn't see because he wasn't available. Let's get into recruiting real quick. I'm going to have to go through this probably quicker than I normally would. I usually start out with that and talk 30 minutes, but we're 51 minutes in. Nate Ament, national number 3. This is the highest rated player that Arkansas is recruiting right now. The highest rated player on the board. Darius Acup Jr., number 5 in the country. That's about as you think, well, that's about as good as it gets. He's already committed to Arkansas. Nate Ament is the 3rd ranked player in the country. 6'9" combo forward out of Virginia, the Highland School. I had a source tell me a few weeks ago that it was real quiet with him in Arkansas. He talked to me about Arkansas back in May. Arkansas was briefly mentioned for him when his recruitment started maybe a little later than others. When I saw him play, he was ranked 18th in the country, and I said, there's not 10 players better than him. Well, apparently there's not more than 3 or 2 because he's the 3rd ranked player behind AJ DeBonsa and Cameron Boozer. And Arkansas is not recruiting those guys. So, the fact that Calipari went in to see him is not necessarily breaking news, but it was shortly after that. And we talked about it recently. I think it was Jamie Shaw or somebody. No, I don't remember who it was. Maybe it was Shaw, but somebody reported nationally that Calipari had just been back out and it was the 3rd time in 2 weeks. Well, the marker was the one I reported. That was the first of those 3 in a 2-week span. That's a lot of trips out there, and Calipari's not wasting his time with that. He's just not. He's not doing that for a guy that he doesn't have set up. We haven't seen anything public out yet. If it's out now while I'm doing this, I'll have to get to it after the fact, but I checked before I came on for an Arkansas visit. He's taken multiple visits. Texas. I think he just recently visited Louisville. Texas and Duke are visits he's already taken. Tennessee. And then Virginia, the home state school, is thought to be, maybe a leader there. But Calipari with 3 stops to see him in Virginia in a 2-week span. At some point, we're going to hear about an upcoming visit with Nate Ament to Arkansas, unless something weird happens. But I thought it was interesting yesterday. Rob Cassidy, a national recruiting analyst that's been around for a while, put out sort of a looking ahead thing on certain players and where he thinks things are going. He thinks Arkansas is a contender. Not only does he think they're a contender for Nate Ament, he thinks it's probably down to Duke and Arkansas. And it's a weird thing. Shelton Henderson, who some people think, because of the relationship with Nate Ament, another 5-star wing. I called Nate Ament a combo forward at 6'9", and I've mentioned multiple times he reminds me of Michael Porter Jr., who's 6'10", plays for the Denver Nuggets. He's their 3-man. At 6'10", he's a 3 in the NBA. He's mainly a 3-point shooter. Has some other spots he gets to, and he's athletic enough and can handle enough to get to the rim, but he's their 3. And a smaller guy at 6'8", Aaron Gordon, is the 4 for the Nuggets. But that's how they play. But a lot of teams are playing certain ways right now where you have taller players actually not on the front line like you would typically think they would be. Nate Ament, to me, that's a perfect example of what kind of player he can be and project to be. He reminds me a lot of Michael Porter Jr. He is definitely a 3 at the pro level, potentially a 3-4 in a system like Denver, where sometimes Porter's the 4 based on what personnel they have on the floor, but typically a 3. I see Nate Ament in the same light. If you consider him a wing at the college level, fine. I think he's a 3-4 at minimum, and we'll play some 4 in certain lineups at the college level, certainly. But Sheldon Henderson is also a wing, a 6'6 guy. There's been talk that Ament and Henderson might want to play college together, but Rob Cassidy thinks that Duke is either going to get one of Henderson or Ament. And if Henderson is off the board first to Duke, he thinks that opens things up for Arkansas. Louisville's the other team that's in play for both, but he thinks Louisville's more of a contender for Henderson than he does Ament right now, from the way I read it. So it's kind of like a 3-team thing with Arkansas and Duke. He thinks being the leaders for Ament, and then let's see what happens with Henderson, and does he end up at Duke, which would maybe open the way for Ament to commit to Arkansas. Well, he hasn't even visited yet. We don't have a public visit date, but it looks to me, I've thought this as soon as I knew that Calipari had been out there 3 times and not just the once that I reported in the few days after that, again, getting back up there twice more. It tells me that a visit's likely coming unless Arkansas moves in another direction. And this is the highest rated player on the board. From an offensive standpoint, it makes sense. This guy, I've said it multiple times, I'll say it again. He is a high efficiency, high volume 3-point shooter. He is great in 2-man game because he sees everything. He makes the right pass. He's not selfish, so he's a setup guy. He can get into a drive game. He's got a nice array of mid-range stuff. He needs to get stronger. The more he penetrates the paint and gets those paint touches, the more that, when he catches some resistance, it affects him. And so those are things. It's a young player. They're all young players. They all got to get improved somewhere. If I had a knock, it's just the strength part of it. This guy, like I said, when I interviewed him and saw him play for the first time in person back in May in Texas, he was ranked 18th. I'm like, there's no way. There's just not that many dudes that are much better than him. And now he's 3rd. So we'll see where the thing with how things go with Nate Ament in Arkansas. And I thought that's interesting. I don't really have any intel source-wise right now. The source that shared with me that Calipari had been out to see him is working on some stuff for me. And I just didn't get that back yesterday like I was hoping to before we came on. So as soon as I do, we'll be back on here. Malik Thomas, I'm going to give you the same answer. I think Arkansas is in the lead. I have one source that thinks Arkansas will get him when the dust settles. As far as I know, he still has a visit scheduled for the weekend of October 25th to the 27th to Kansas State. Last time we were on, I talked about this crystal ball futurecast stuff and said I wasn't quite there yet. So that means I'm not 100%. I have no knowledge of a private or silent commitment, which would then get me to where I would do something like that if I did those. So I'm not 100% to it yet. I'm more than, I would say, a strong lean, slight lean, like I said for forever about Eric Patrick Melsman packing his bags and moving on. I'm a heavier lean towards Malik Thomas to Arkansas. So I'm still there with that. We'll see about that Kansas State visit. Again, if something upsets the apple cart, it'll be a leverage play on NIL, and Arkansas will reach a limit and say, nah. And that's the only way that, in my opinion, they don't get him. But that stuff's got to play out. We'll see. Sean Abayev took a midweek visit last week, 24th rated in Rivals, 6'7" combo guard. Malik Thomas, by the way, ranked 7th, a 5-star out of Pittsburgh and overtime elite. I mentioned Cal on our last segment going to Pittsburgh between the Hot Springs event and then having an event the very next day in Pine Bluff. He jets off to Pittsburgh in the intermediary time there. And he said, he was on the record in Pine Bluff when we interviewed him in the post-practice presser, that he had a coach's clinic. Well, I'd learned that actually prior to him talking on the record, and I went back to the YouTube in the comment section and just added that in there. But I'll say this, he's a multitasker. When he goes out of town, a lot of the stuff he puts out with pictures, it's stuff he's doing while he's also handling recruiting business because he can't put stuff out regarding that. And I'm not saying that any of that had to do with being in Pittsburgh for Malik Thomas for sure, but that's where Malik is. And if there's any recruiting business there, it would be about him. And it's a possibility that he was multitasking. He just can't speak on it. But getting back to Sean Abayev, he took the midweek visit. I think at least one national recruiting analyst thinks Arkansas is in the lead there. We'll see. We'll see what else he does. He's taken several visits. Auburn was thought to be a leader for him at one point. He's visited Syracuse. He's visited USC. We'll see with Sean Abayev, but love his game, 6'7" combo guard. Multi-talented guy, can play the wing, the two, and look, he can play the one. He can play the one. I've seen enough. Really good player. Mika Murinen, we talked about him, class 2026. Might end up reclassing to 2025 at some point. Arizona Compass Prep. Took an Arkansas visit. Was the first one really this fall, because you had to go back to ACUF back in May before he committed in July. But Murinen, from my source that talked to him, he said the Arkansas visit was by far his best. He'd already been to Utah and Michigan. He didn't make the Duke visit the weekend after the Arkansas visit, which was in late September. He was going to visit Kentucky and then put that off, or maybe doesn't. I don't know, but he's got plenty of time. Usually those decisions to reclass are made after the season, after the school year, in the spring. Doesn't mean that he won't figure it out and change his mind and do something early. I think that's unlikely. I think it drags out. I think Arkansas is in great shape with him. I wouldn't say that it's an Arkansas lean, because there's too much unknown and too far probably to go to say that, other than to say we like the Arkansas visit better than the other ones. All right, we are now rolling over an hour. I've done it again. Chrisenek Jr., I don't know why. This is the weekend, by the way. We're finally approaching the October 18th through 20th weekend. The weekend that is supposed to be Arkansas's heaviest visit weekend, if these hold out, if these hold true. Chrisenek Jr., 6'10", pushing 6'11", combo forward, top 5 rated 5-star in the 2025 class. At Link Academy in Branson, is supposed to have an official visit to Arkansas this weekend. We'll see how that plays out. Calipari's been out to see him multiple times. It could be a scenario where Arkansas's in a mix with Kentucky and LSU for him, but he's got to make it to campus. And so let's see, because he had a previous one set for mid-September. That didn't happen. It's kind of gotten quiet with this Arkansas visit again. You don't see a lot of chirping about it on social media or publicly. We'll see if he holds to it. Kingston Flemings, who's had Arkansas in his top 5, had a schedule visited for this weekend as well. We'll see if that holds up. A national top 20 rated 6'3" lead guard out of San Antonio. Texas Tech, he just visited, took an unofficial visit there recently, has been on the campuses of Texas and Houston. Other finalists, Gonzaga, one of his 5 finalists, and then Arkansas. The way the schedule was set up, Arkansas was to be his final visit. We'll see if he makes it to campus. And then one more time, Arkansas does have a visitor, Devin Cleveland from the class of 2027. ESPN expected to come in for an unofficial visit, a sophomore, 6'3" guard out of Chicago. ESPN ranks him 11th in the country, a 5-star. We still have our eyes open on Caleb Wilson Watts. I think he's visiting Georgia Tech this weekend. We'll see if anything ever materializes publicly with that Arkansas visit that was to happen the final weekend or late October and maybe sometime in November, and then it got drilled down. That'll be the last weekend of October is what I was told weeks and weeks ago. I was never able to really talk about it until we've now run out of calendar, so it becomes obvious. We'll see if it ever sees a light of day and he makes it to campus. Koa Pete's been one of those that's really, since he didn't come visit Arkansas, it's looking less and less likely that ever happens, but a guy that has been talked about, it's been talked about that maybe he waits to the spring. If he does that, anything can happen between now and then, I guess. And a lot of this other stuff will shake out with some of these guys. That's really it. I rushed through recruiting today. I still carried us over an hour. Shame on me. Thank you for those who endured it. I hope you got something out of it. Some of my opinions, I probably rushed through stuff today because I had a lot. You know, if I did these daily, I could probably keep them to 10 to 12, 15 minutes and just talk about one thing and get on the subject and off. Maybe I'm kidding myself there. I'd probably find a way to turn one topic into 30 anyway. But I appreciate you for joining me on HogvilleNET YouTube Live. If you haven't done it already, one more ask. Please hit subscribe, like, share the content if you can, if you like it. And if something breaks and is important today, we're going to jump right back on here if it's significant enough. If not, again, I appreciate you being here. And until next time, I'll see you then.